welcome everyone. This is our second year of celebrating the International Day of Women and Girls in Science. It's an official day that's been recognized for quite some time. We just didn't start celebrating it ourselves until last year. And I'm glad that we do it. We bring in a lot of really impressive speakers. And today we have folks from UT Med School, UT Tyler Med School, UT Tyler Pharmacy School, UT Austin, all the way from UT Austin, our chemical engineer, and then formerly Commerce, now East Texas A&M. We'll have an instructor from there as well. So I also want to advertise next week. We're going to have the National Marrow Donor Program folks here. I'm wearing my Be the Match shirt. They used to be the Match. And so they'll be on the different campuses. For the Athens campus, they'll be here on Wednesday from 8 a.m. until 1 p.m. in the Gibbs building. So if you've never joined the registry or might be interested in joining the registry and becoming a donor, you can talk to those folks on Wednesday in the Gibbs building. And that's a kind of a continuation. I like to use February kind of as the month of love, love towards our female scientists, love towards humanity with our Be the Match visits and everything. And then I'll be trumping up Earth Day, which will be the 22nd of April, coming up pretty soon as well. So anyway, without further ado, I'm going to introduce our first speaker. So Dr. Gavan, Gavan is from UT Tyler Med School, and she is an associate professor of medical education, and she's also, and this is just by chance, she's also the president of Women in Medicine and Science. So it fit perfectly for today's event because that's what it's all about, is women and girls in science. So again, I'll let her take the stage. And again, thank her for coming.
I'm going to put some water here in case I cough. So I apologize, my voice is a little raspy. Just getting over a head cold, as maybe some of you have been experiencing since we've been going through this back and forth weather things, and our viral bugs and our bacteria love the change in weather. So if you've been dealing with some of that stuffiness, just know that it's normal. So I just want to take a little bit to introduce myself. My name is Rebeca Gavan. I am a physician by training. Family medicine is my background. Currently, I serve as one of the associate deans at the UT Tyler School of Medicine. I'm also a professor. I oversee and teach all of the clinical courses, which is where our medical students learn how to do physical exams, take histories. Really all of the doctoring part of medicine is the courses that I teach. I always say that they're the funnest classes too, because you're not sitting in some biochemistry and physiology, which those are super important, but I get to do the hands-on courses with our students, and we use standardized patients to do that. So we use patient actors, to be able to bring that life skill to our students. So that way they're practicing on real bodies and not just mannequins or each other. So I'm extremely grateful for what I get to teach. I think it is the funnest part of medicine, is how to be a doctor. And my title today is Becoming a Doctor, and it's not a typo that the be and the coming is not together, although English is my second language, and stay tuned for that a little bit later. It's not a typo, it is purposeful and intentional, because I think in the field of medicine, particularly for me, we are still becoming. We are still doing, we are still learning, and it is something that you'll quickly learn as you enter and dip your toes into health fields or medical fields, is that knowledge is changing, guidelines are changing, things that we're learning, everything every day we're growing and learning. And so I think that we're still becoming. I think that you could be 60 years in the field and you're still learning something. And it may not be that there's a new scientific discovery or that there's a new diagnosis or a new treatment, although we're doing really great on new treatments, but you learn a lot every day from your patients. And so I think that's that part where you're always going to be coming, you're always going to be fulfilling that dream and growing a little every day. We can go to the next slide. I don't have a clicker, so is it okay if I tell you all to do that? Okay, perfect. Okay, so I just want to quickly go over the traditional path of what it looks like to get into medical school or medicine or become a doctor. And then a little slides later, we'll talk about just maybe how that looks different for different folks in non-traditional paths. So traditional path, it remains very competitive. So what you're hearing, right, if you're starting to ask around for counselors or friends and folks to just ask them, what does it take to get to medical school? Is it true that it's really hard to get in? Is the MCAT really? Yes, right? So everything that you're hearing, it still remains very competitive. It is a sought after field, right? And so that is still true. Many candidates have postbacs and master degrees, right? So what I've displayed for you in this continuum is just kind of the traditional way where you would go from a 4-year bachelor degree, typically in science, right? And so we do have medical students who have a different background. Maybe they have engineering or bioengineering, or maybe they even have some liberal arts background, but the typical science part is there are prerequisites that you have to have for medical school. And so even if your 4-year degree is in something not science related, you end up having to take all those prerequisites anyway to be able to be eligible. So that is why typically if you know you want to go to medical school, you try to align that 4-year degree so that you're not doubling the work of your 4-year degree plus all the eligibility requirements that you have to do for medical school. But we have seen students who come in with various background degrees that are not science related. So you go from that 4-year bachelor degree to a 4-year MD or DO school. Just by a show of hands, do y'all know the difference between an MD or a DO degree? When you see that on your physicians when you go visit and you see some of them say DO, some of them say MD. Someone know the difference? Not really, right? Okay, so really simply put, so allopathic is the MD, medical doctor degree. There are medical schools that give you that degree that's called the MD degree, and then there are medical schools that give you the DO degree or osteopathic. They train similarly. They're both 4-year medical schools. Really the only difference is the way that they learn. In osteopathic DO schools, they learn a lot more of the body manipulation. They use a lot of musculoskeletal in their learning. So it's really just that the way that they approach medicine is a little bit different with osteopathic, but once they're done with medical school and they go over to residencies, all residencies are the same, right? So if you're seeing your primary care physician or your OB-GYN or an orthopedic and you're seeing that they have DO there, they still went to a medical school. It was just specific if it was osteopathic or allopathic, but the residency is the same and they have the same training. So pretty much there's an approach difference to education in medical school, but once you shoot over to residency, it levels the playing field. Everyone has to do the same program in residency. So once you're done with your medical school degree, whether MD or DO, you have residency, right? So it doesn't end till there. So we've got 3 to 7 years of residencies. This is specialty dependent. So 3 years is going to be your family medicine, pediatrics, right? And so there are residencies that are shorter, and then there's residencies that are really long. Like if you're wondering what residency is that 7-year, it's neurosurgery, right? So when we're thinking about just the highest level of medicine, complexity, liability, right? You've got that 7-year residency for something like neurosurgery. And then there's fellowship after. So if you didn't want to be done with education, you can actually go into a specialty and then sub-specialize, right? So you do a fellowship on top of your residency to get even more education in a subspecialty. So this is the traditional path, but what I'm going to just hopefully spend the rest of the time doing is just kind of try to motivate y'all. Like there are lots of ladies and women and young gals in here, but there are also some guys. So thanks guys for showing up to a Women in Science event. So I'm hopefully going to try to motivate everybody where they're at and not be specific to, if you're a woman or a man in science, and also just specific to your journey, because your journey might look different than this traditional path, and to motivate you and encourage you to keep going on whatever path that is. So we can go to the next slide, please. All right, so the not so secret formula, right? So how do you do all of those years? If you were doing some math, If you're some math out there in the audience and you were looking at the 4-year plus the 4-year plus the 3-year, like how do we do 11 to 17 years of education before we get into this career, right? Well, here's the not so secret ingredients, right? Here's the formula to that. Faith, perseverance, and love. Right, and so you can see how this is something that you can actually use and translate into any field in medicine, any field in the healthcare, any field that takes care of others. This has been the formula for my life. And similar to those beakers that we see there, it takes a little bit of faith, right? So you see that first little part that's going in, a little bit of faith. That's all you really need to start with, right? A little bit of faith and let that grow. And we'll talk about what that looks like in just perspective of my life. So just a little bit of faith, let that grow. Need a lot more perseverance, that second beaker going there, right? A lot more perseverance because there will be trials. There will be things that will be really hard, difficulties. There will be failed exams. There may be failed board exams, right? You have to have that perseverance to keep going. And that last beaker is a whole lot of love. You really do need a whole lot of love. It's not just a virtue. It's not just a characteristic. It's something that not only gets you to the end, but prevents you from apathy, prevents burnout, right? We hear a lot of physicians. I have a lot of colleagues that have left the field, especially after COVID, because of burnout, because of things in the field. And so that love is really protective. We can go to the next slide, please. Okay, so I'm going to put this definition here, and I want some audience participation. I know it's early. I didn't drink my coffee, so I hear you, but maybe if we can just have just a few kind of shout out. This is a definition, and I want you to tell me if this is faith, perseverance, or love. So it's defined as unwavering loyalty, belief, and trust by the Association of Psychology in America. What do you think that is? What do you think definition this is? Is this faith? Is this perseverance? Or is it love? Anyone, shout it out. From the back, from the front. Love and faith. All right, got two. All right, let's see what it is. You click perfect. It is faith. Good job to our faith back there. Yes. So it is defined as unwavering, as loyal, as belief and trust, right? And so, like I mentioned before, you need a little bit of this to get you going. So my personal story for this is I am an immigrant to America. So at 5 years old, my parents left the communist country of Romania. It's okay if you have no idea where Romania is. The biggest question I always get is that in Rome? No, it's its own country. It's over by, which you may have heard, Ukraine in the news a lot. So we actually border Ukraine, the Black Sea, Turkey, right? So we're right there in Eastern Europe. And so I left Romania very young. As a young child, my parents fled there because of the communism that was happening and the revolution and all of that. And so it did. It took a little bit of faith. And for my family to really take that step and say that they wanted something bigger, they wanted something greater for their lives, for us as the kids. And we actually immigrated with my entire family. So my grandparents left first, and then as soon as they got to the U.S., they were able to call over their children, which was my dad, my aunt, my uncle. So it was our whole entire family came over from Romania in 1991. And so that's really how that journey starts for me, because coming into a country with absolutely zero, without speaking the language, right? Everyone had to start from zero. We all had to, persevere, which is going to come up next too. But that little bit of faith is really what started us going. And it may look different for each of you, right? But the way to really think about this is it has to be bigger than yourself. Right? Whatever you're doing, whatever aspirations, visions, dreams that you have for your life, it's got to be bigger than yourself, right? And so in order to do that, there has to be something there that you believe in order to be able to attain these greater dreams, right? Greater dreams of what you have for yourself. And that's what my mom did. She had great dreams for her girls, where I'm one of 3 girls. So I am a family medicine physician. The middle sister, and I'm the oldest. The middle sister is a psychiatrist, and our youngest sister is a lawyer for the Air Force. She's a JAG. So if you can believe it, right? right? My mom, who came over with absolutely nothing, believing that her girls could do something, and then now people always ask her, like, what did you do? What did you feed these girls, right? Like, what did you do to have, these high aspirational goals? And really, it was just in our household, every time we would tell my mom a dream, she would say, and you could do more, and you could be more, and you could do greater. And so she was always giving us this faith of it's bigger than yourself, believe in something greater. All right, we can go to the next slide. Okay, back to your engagement. So here's the definition here. The ones we have left are perseverance and love. Defined as continued effort to do or achieve something despite difficulties, failure, or opposition. Is this perseverance or love? Good job, perseverance, getting the hang of it. Yes, perseverance, we can shoot that up there. Yep, so as you probably heard, right, it's coming to America, we had to have a lot of perseverance, starting off in odd jobs, like my mom was cleaning houses, my dad was washing cars, right, things like that, until they learned English. They went to community college. My dad then became a professor of computer science at a community college. My mom became a nurse. She's now a school nurse and oversees multiple schools where they currently reside. And so that took a lot of perseverance. For myself as well, I went through the public school system, high school. I wasn't really sure what I wanted to do. To be honest, I was not one of the 3 girls that said I wanted to be a doctor. That was my middle sister. From the time that she could talk, she told my mom she wanted to be a doctor. I was more of the dreamer. I wanted to be a teacher. I wanted to be an actress. Everything that you can imagine, right? I said I wanted to be everything. And so luckily my parents had some great wisdom, and they said, well, how about you start with just taking some classes and seeing where that passion lies. And so because my dad was at a community college, I started at community college. I started taking all of the just basic core classes and realized that I actually really did love science. Believe it or not, loved my biochemistry classes, loved my anatomy and physiology, and because my mom was a nurse, I thought, well, why not do all of the prerequisites to go to nursing school? And that's kind of how it started for me. So I did everything to get into nursing school, and then even went as far as applying to nursing school. And then my mom, in her faith, said, but what if you could do more? And I said, what do you mean, Mom? You're a nurse, right? That's a great profession. It's, you could be an NP, you could be independent, shorter school. I don't have to go to school for 11 years, shorter loans. And she said, yes, but what if it could be greater? What if you could do something greater? And because she knew that I was the dreamer of her girls, and I wanted to travel the world, and I wanted to be able to do things in different countries, I told her I wanted to actually go study abroad. And that's when she was like, okay, what are you doing to me, child? Right? Because she's thinking, okay, so not only are you not certain what you want to do, but now you want to go abroad. And if you don't know, it's not that easy to go get a degree in another country and come back to the U.S., right? The U.S. doesn't recognize a lot of the degrees from other countries, and so my mom started doing some research with me, and she really kind of came to the table and said, okay, listen, the only 2 degrees that you can get outside of the U.S. that can come back to the U.S. is a PhD or an MD. And I was like, really? That's it? And she's like, yes, you can't go get a nursing degree in another country and come back. You can't go into dentistry. You can't really do any other thing in the healthcare field and be recognized in the U.S. The U.S. is just very protective of those that come in, right? They have their boards and all of that. And so with those 2 options, I said, well, I'm not sure I want to do PhD. And I do like medicine, and I could see myself being a doctor, but it just seemed like it was such a big goal, so many years, so many loans. So my mom actually found a school in Romania, which is where I'm from, in the capital of Romania, that had an English program, which means I would be doing the entire school in English, not in Romanian. And she presented that to me and said, if you're really serious about going abroad, you're really serious about doing something that you can do in any country, I think this could be an option. And so I packed 1 suitcase, and I went over to Romania to go check out this school, much like y'all do when you go check out your schools and see what you're interested in. And I went to go check out this school, and they had just started their class about a month in. They were a month in. And the dean of that school said, well, since you're here checking it out, And if you like it and if you're serious, instead of waiting until next year, if you take the entrance exam, which is very similar to like an MCAT, you have to take an exam to get into medical school. And he said, if you take this entrance exam and you pass, you can stay. So I called my parents and I was like, this is crazy, right? But remember, they have a lot of faith now, right? And so they were like, well, if you take this exam and you pass, you can stay. And so I took the exam and I passed and I stayed. And that is how my journey to medical school went. Not the non-traditional path of just wanting to go and see if there was something greater, something bigger, that also met a lot of my dreams that I wanted to have with living abroad, working abroad, and I stayed in Romania. Now, the medical school in Romania and in Europe is actually a little bit different in their setup. Typically, it's 6 years because you do a couple more years of clinical so that when you're out, done with medical school, you are a general practitioner. And so they do that on purpose because they want folks to be able to finish medical school and directly start to practice. You can still specialize, you can still do residencies, but their medical school is 6 years in contrast to the US, which is 4 years. So I did medical school there, and I finished. I met my husband there, got married, and then there was just a shift when we got pregnant with our first child and wanting to come back to the U.S. And then I came back to the U.S. in 2013 and started my journey here with getting certified, doing boards. I started working with a new medical school in California. So I am from California. That is where my parents immigrated to, and that's where they still currently are. So I started working with the new University of California Medical School out there. I loved it, loved teaching. And I stayed on as faculty and doing a lot of work with them there. We can go to the next slide. Okay. So my non-traditional path, which I just described to you, right? I went to a community college, did 2 years there, went straight into medical school for 6 years. If you put it together, it still equals the 8 years that you saw previously, but it was a very non-traditional path because it was just the journey of my life. But I want to just convey that it may look different for you. It may be that you are in the U.S. My advice is always, when people hear my story, they say, so do you recommend that people go to medical school outside the U.S.? My answer to that is, if you want to be a doctor in the U.S., no, do not go outside the U.S. I wanted to be a doctor in other parts of the world so that I could do that in other countries, which now having a European Union license, I can do that. But that's not the journey for everybody, right? And so if your dream is to be a doctor in the U.S., definitely go to a U.S. school. It is a lot harder to go outside the U.S. and come back. You do have to take all of the boards here. You do have to apply for residency, go to residency. You're competing with U.S. students, right? And so I would not recommend that. But, right, it's a non-traditional path that you may have where you go and do a degree or have a career in something else and then come back. Currently, out of our students that we have at UT Tyler right now, we have lots of folks who have been pharmacists for a while and are coming back. We have a mother, actually, who has had a long career in nursing and is coming back and is wanting to actually pursue becoming a doctor. If it happens, one of her children is actually applying to medical school, and so it will be something that will probably be broadcast all over East Texas to have this mom and her child in medical school at the same time, which is amazing. But that's how a non-traditional path may look like, that you may go in one area and end up coming to medicine in a different way, and that's okay. Just know that that's your path and that's okay. We can go to the next click there. So my path, as contrast to the other one that you saw that was really solid, took a lot of resilience and perseverance because I did, other things. I got married and had kids. I took boards while having kids, right? And so it just looked very different. But in the end, with perseverance, I'm in a place that I love. I'm teaching, which I love. I get to see patients with my students, which I love. So even though that path may look a little different, that decision made to be a doctor and then what it takes to get there, it can look messy. It can look different. That's okay, as long as you get to that end goal and you're in something in a field and doing something every day that you love. We can go to the next slide. Okay, so this one you guys should all know it. Our last definition, defined as selfless, sacrificial commitment to the well-being of others. What is our last word? Love. Good job. Yes, it's love. So that is kind of how I want to end with is, this is that one in the beaker that you needed a lot of, because when it comes down to it every single day, right, you have to fill that cup. And so what do you use to fill that cup of love for yourself? What do you use to fill that cup for others? This is a field where you're often sacrificing yourself, your family, right, to put others first. Not very many fields do that, but healthcare and medical does, because you are serving others, taking care of others, and often you're doing that at the sacrifice of yourself and those around you too. And so it takes a lot of love, but it's protective, right? And so when you understand that, and you really strive every day to make sure that you're loved and that you have love to give, it's going to help prevent you from burnout, again, from apathy, from just feeling like you're just checking the boxes. These are just 20 patients on your list today. You see people for who they are. You love people truly. It really makes your job not only be able to do it, but it makes you feel fulfilled and satisfied, and you're at peace with what you're doing. Go to the next slide. Okay. I think I'm keeping on time. Yes, okay. I left 5 minutes for any questions that you may have. I'm sorry, it was a lightning story of my life, but I entertain any questions that you might have. Yes. You're good. How can you become a patient actor? Ooh, yes. Okay. So we have, if you go to UT Tyler, I think it's our main website, UT Tyler, and go under our job postings, you can look this up. It's called a simulated patient. SP for short, simulated patient. It is always posted as an open position because we're always recruiting. And that's a really good question that you have, because if you're maybe interested and you're not sure about, becoming a doctor or medical school, this is a great window for you to do that, because you get to sit there as a patient and see what the students are doing, learn really at what the students are learning too, and see if that's something you would like. We actually have SPs that apply to medical school. So they are currently doing their 4-year degrees. They're wanting to put something on their resume that looks really good, and they're just interested in wanting to know a little more. They come and do this. It's a paid position, so we do pay you. And it's fun, right? If you have a little bit of acting in you, it's fun to do. And they get to come and do that. And then we've had quite a few of them apply to medical school after this. So yeah, that's a great question. Any other questions? Yes. Yeah. Yeah, yeah. And I do think it takes that long. Like, I understand that the length of time is because there's a lot of knowledge, right? There is a whole lot of knowledge to be learned. And there's a lot of testing. If you saw that slide that I put on there, make sure you like testing or you're willing to work at it, because there's a whole lot of testing all the time. But to your point, I think it takes that long to build character. This is a profession where you are every day in the position to look at the most broken things in someone's life, right? So you're looking at either their their sickness in their body, their sickness in their mind. It's a very vulnerable position. And so I always tell my students, the hardest part of my job is not teaching them how to listen to the heart or how to listen to the lungs or where to place the stethoscope and make sure that they hear those crackles or what. The hardest part of my job is helping them understand that they have some virtues to work on, because good humans make good doctors. And that is very hard to do, right? To understand that you are 8 years working on your character, yourself, before you can put yourself out there and take care of others. That's really what takes a really long time. Because the knowledge, AI is going to beat us, right? We've already seen lots of things get put out there that AI can diagnose you, AI can tell you what the best treatment is, AI can do your job, right? That's essentially what they're saying. AI, if you haven't heard also, AI has taken our board exams and passed. So the same board exams that I studied months and months and months for, AI took them and passed, right? And so I'm not fearful of that, because what AI cannot do is human touch. AI cannot stand alongside my patient and put their arm around them and cry with them and understand what they're going through and say, I'm here no matter what, I support you. AI will never be able to do that. So no, AI will never take our jobs, right? Because that is the hardest part of what we're doing, is caring for people, truly caring for people. Good comment, thank you. Any other questions? Yes. You're very welcome. And you're not retired, you're rewired. That's what I always tell them. We have a lot of SPs, right, simulated patients that come and say, I'm retired, want to do something different. I say, well, you're ready to rewire. What else are you going to do in life? Thank you. Any last questions? And I'll give it over to. Favorite doctor medical TV show? You know, I probably didn't watch as much when I was in medical school, to be honest, because you just don't have time. And now when I watch them, it annoys me because the stuff is wrong. I'm like, what are they doing? It is so wrong. So like Grey's Anatomy and all that, I didn't really get into. But my favorite had to be the old school, the OG one with Dr. Clooney, the ER ones. Like, I think those were awesome. And probably if I watch them now, they did a lot of errors too. But I think the OG, like Dr. Clooney, ER was great. Okay, well, thank you so much, everyone. And I'll hand it back to our presenters today.
Dr. Contreras has joined us all the way from UT Austin, and I appreciate her coming all this way to the big city of Athens, Texas. She brought her, is it your mother or your grandmother? My mother. Your mother. Your sister. She brought her sister with her because she heard that Northeast Texas is a pretty place. And I said, I don't know who told you that, but welcome anyway. So she is a chemical engineer, which is quite a bit different than our medical doctor. And she'll be followed up by an ecologist, which is quite a bit different from a chemical engineer. So you get to see the diversity of potential careers in the sciences that you as a female or as a male can go into as well. But this is a day to celebrate women and girls in science, and that's why all of our speakers represent that particular set of chromosomes. So Welcome, Dr. Contreras, and thank you again for being here.
Good morning, everyone. So the slides are showing a little weird, but we're going to make do with what we have. So it's really great to be here. It's my first time in East Texas. I'm a native of the Dominican Republic who also has an immigration story, but came to the United States very young as a child to New York City. So I'm still exploring, even though I've been here in Texas teaching for 15 years, I'm still exploring various sides of Texas. So my slides will move a little quicker, so I'm just going to kind of raise my hand so we can move on to the next one. I am a professor in chemical engineering, started my career here in Austin about 16 years ago as a professor, and I also now serve as an associate dean of the grad school, so I get to do and think a lot about how do we move graduate students, PhDs forwards across many different areas. So we're gonna move ahead. Oh yeah, they're not showing very well. Anyway, this slide was supposed to be about what is really this concept of doing good. So it turns out that when you say about, our last speaker and this talk is going to have a lot in common. And what the last talk called love and faith, I think it's my way of saying doing good. That's really where I found my inspiration for a lot of what I do today. For the 11 plus years that I also had to go through training between college, a PhD, and postdoctoral trainings to do what I do today. And it turns out that when you talk about doing good, it's not really often clear. We just assume that people kind of know what we mean when we say about doing good, but it's actually challenging, can be misinterpreted, doesn't mean the same thing to other people. And moreover, it can even mean quite a lot of sacrifice to ourselves, our family, our friends, our communities. So what is really this concept of doing good? The good thing about thinking about it and being in tune with it is that it can also be extremely motivational, not just to have those big dreams that you want to have every day, but to really do all the little things every day that keep fueling you to keep on going. And so I have been thinking a lot about my career and my trajectory here. If we go to the next one. How many of you have seen Wicked? Okay, we have some Wicked people in the room. If you have 9-year-old twins, like I do, one a girl and one a boy, you probably couldn't have escaped Wicked. They were obsessed with Wicked. And I refused for a while to watch a witch movie. I thought it was just another witch movie. But it turns out, when I actually saw the first Wicked, the second Wicked, there were a lot of themes that really resonated with me. And in essence, if you haven't seen it, Wicked is the story of this Elphaba person who, before she's labeled wicked, her only thing that she wants to do is do some good for the world. She notices that there are things around that are quite not right, and she wants to fix it. And what's really interesting for me as I reflected on that is that immediately when I saw the movie, I could identify with a lot of the feelings that come around with being a person in STEM, a woman in STEM, a person that can maybe have a different life experience from a lot of the people sitting in an engineering room. And this was something that immediately captivated me about the movie. We can go on. Yeah, and so these were some of the parallels. Not to say that all of us are Elphaba or witch or from the Wicked West, etc. But what's really interesting is that feeling that the movie captures about, again, being someone that has unique ideas, unique life experiences, that it's evaluated differently, that can feel underestimated or can feel doesn't have the right training or not a traditional path to become a person in STEM. And so when I thought about this, we can move on to the next one. The slides are not showing up. I can also just grab my laptop and look at the notes here and just not display it. Maybe we do that. Okay, Rebecca, do you mind if you give me my laptop for that? I apologize, everyone. Thank you. Okay, maybe we can try that.
This is also a good time if once the coffee is here, there are cookies out there and there's
Yes, that just means you need a coffee break. That's right.
intermission while we deal with technical difficulties. This is why AI will not rule the world anytime soon.
I probably don't need the slides. You know, I was just thinking about that. I didn't want to be too, but I was thinking, they get to see live how you experience setbacks and you just keep on going. I was just thinking about that. Perseverance. And John, if worst comes to worst, I can just guide the points I wanted to make and we don't need the slides. Hey, my husband it's the football he dreamed of, yes, and the weather I dreamed of, and people are extremely friendly. That's looking good. All right, thank you for doing that. Hopefully this is the winner. All right, so we can move forward a little bit. They're showing good now. Yep, they're looking good. Yep. So I think we were talking about this feeling that this movie kind of captured us. I thought a little bit about my journey as a woman in STEM. And the fact of the matter is, what it also reinforced is me when I asked myself the question, well, how do you keep going? What do I tell my students? What do I tell my kids? How do you keep going? And what I really realized is that the reason why we wake up every day and we come to presentations and we do what we do is because being in STEM, doing science, really feels meaningful to me. And I really also know that what I do and the job I do could really help somebody, could really help the world, help communities in very tangible ways. And I hope you get that out of some of the work that we're doing that I'll show you today. Okay, so if you ever question, and I think, again, we heard this concept, non-traditional paths, people that take different ways to get to where they get to. So if you really question, do I belong here? Are there other students at STEM like me? Can I be successful doing science, being an engineer, being a microbiologist, a biochemist, an aerospace engineer? You're not the only one. I think we've all questioned it. And to be honest with you, there are tough days where we still wake up and question it, right? So that's a very natural feeling that I want you all to know that is completely valid to have. So the idea is, so where do we go from here? So a little bit about me and where I started. So before any of these kind of fancy titles that you've heard today, where my journey started was really with curiosity. Interestingly, it was a different type of curiosity that many people expected me to have. So I came from a family that was very traditional with roles. And so the gifts that I would get would be dolls, and little dolls to change diapers with, and boards and iron to learn how to wash and iron clothes, and washing sets and kitchen sets. So to me, it was also really interesting how my brother always had the most exciting toys. The robots that made noises, and the cars that could fly, and the control remotes. And so very hiddenly, I would always say, well, how does your robot work? And how does your little car move around? So that's what always captivated me, with this curiosity of how things kind of worked. And I distinctly remember when the first time I realized that I really enjoyed making things and tinkling with things and putting things together, that my aunt, who's more in the life science medical profession, said to me, "You're gonna do what? You're gonna be like those guys that climb up bridges with overalls and a hard hat? Engineering literally is a very ugly profession for a woman." And that was a huge setback. I didn't know what to think of this. I didn't know how what I liked wasn't compatible with what other people thought I should be doing. What I liked about science, I liked the physical sciences, wasn't compatible with this idea that I just kind of needed to be taking care of dolls. And in that type of family, believe it or not, dreaming of being an engineer was a revolutionary idea, if you can really believe that, right? And so the early lesson that I learned about this is that having the perfect situation where everybody's encouraging you and rooting you and backing you up, and the perfect support structure, sometimes it's not really what you need. In my case, it was really noticing what light me up, that theme of being lit up by something exciting. And so that early curiosity got me to lots of science fairs and experiencing what it was like to do science. And these are pictures of, I recently relived those experiences. My twins, who are now 9, did their first science fair. And it brought back that same excitement I felt at 9 and 10 years old. They were building drones, they were building paper planes, and measuring distances, and measuring how far you threw it. And you can see the excitement. It was fun, it was exciting. But it also brought back to me this idea that science fairs, have any of you done a science fair ever? Do you also remember, how many of you remember that thrill of doing your project? And then how many of you remember day off where you're like, and I really have to present this? And I really have to show up and tell a judge what I did and answer questions? So I brought back a lot of those feelings. But what really made me realize is that joy of here collaborating, having a friend to talk about idea, having a team, an opportunity to figure things out on your own, and really that excitement of discovery. We can go to the next one. And so I wish I can tell you those fears would go away and that it was only back when I was 9, but in reality, that sort of barrier of doing things and presenting it and being questioned and being asked questions is still pretty intimidating. There's still a lot of times when I have big discoveries in the lab and we submit it and we write results and we go present it where you're super nervous about, well, what if this doesn't mess up? A lot like my kids were when they were thinking, this drone have always flown, but what if it doesn't fly in front of the judge? What if that day it doesn't work? What if I don't have all the right answers? And so those are things, that notion of what comes to your head every time you go and take that challenging class, or you want to do an internship, or you want to consider a different job. All those feelings, I still wrestle on, right? That idea of, as my kids will say, being brave, and as we would say, stepping out of the box, still can feel very, very intimidating. But what I started realizing is that over the years, what started the question as, can I do this? Can I do engineering? Can I be an engineer? Started really shifting. And it started really shifting to, you know what, I know I want to do this, and I know I love to do this. So what kind of STEM person do I want to be in a way that's fulfilling to me? So that's what the question turned into, which told me, you know, the confidence is building up. It's getting there. And this notion, this dream is getting more and more exciting every day. And so when I started thinking about this idea of, we can go to the next one, that a fulfilling career, it's definitely that light that still lights me up every day. But I still don't want you to lose sight as I show you all these exciting things that I come across around every day in my career life. I recently did an interview, a podcast, about 3 weeks ago. The name of the podcast was called Failed Tales. And my first question to the interviewee was, well, where do you want me to start? The biggest challenge about being a scientist is, and the biggest personal growth you have to do every day, is accepting failures. I always tell my students, if we work on safe things, if we work on things that will work, if we work on things that people know the answers, we'll never push science forward. It's about failing. It's about risks. Exciting science is doing things nobody has done. Nobody has tried. So you have to be prepared to fail. And failure, it's hard to get. It's hard to get up when you fail. There's embarrassment. There's a hit on your self-confidence. So that's probably the biggest and hardest thing every scientist has to learn how to do. And so this fail tales. I told the story about how my very first week in college, I completely failed my AP, my physics test. And that was a huge blow. There were so many thoughts about whether or not that was confirmation. You know, when you're looking for a confirmation to sort of satisfy that side of your brain that's pulling you in one direction with that sense of doubt? That was mine. Does that mean I shouldn't do this? Does that mean I can't do this? And that's very hard to beat. But hey, here I am 20-something years later. So those feelings will always come back. If we move on. So a big part of what I've done in my career, it's everyday define of what is doing good for myself. What does that mean? What would I be happy about waking up every moment thinking that I'm doing? And there are things that I've had asked myself through the years. What do I care about? What are my passions? Right? Where do I want to see my work? Who do I want to help? So it became very personal. It's very similar to that sense of love and passion we heard in the talk before. It was not just about success and accumulating a degrees or 3 letters after my name. It's not just about these titles. It's not about checking the box. It's really about impact. And aligning what I do every day with my own values. Waking up every day feeling that what I'm doing, it's my own sense of defining good for me. And of course, doing good when you come from a poor family, when you have family responsibilities. It's also about not letting down your family. It's also about being a contributor to the community. So how those things clash together, for me, was really engineering and science. And so for me, engineering, as my aunt did, a lot of people think about the hard hat and the overalls and the people that go out there and measure things. But for me, it was really an opportunity to discover and build things that would kind of help my community and the world. It was a way to use my strengths. It was a way to build up my technical skills, a way to meet mentors that would be with me. And if I took the academic science route, it was a way to invest in young people's lives so they can also realize their dream. And that was extremely powerful to me. And so maybe you want to think about, as you consider your own careers, your own path, and the things that are important to you: stability, family, creativity, helping others, teamwork, flexibility. At the end of the day, what will wake you up every day, even if you failed the day before? That's what has become crystal clear to me to sort of guide every day of my career. So that's really what, where I started my path in chemical engineering. I went to school and I decided, well, you know what, chemical engineering is awesome. I get to see the invisible. That was super exciting. I get to think about molecules and devising ways to do molecules ultimately to see things that people cannot see. And so that's what was really impactful for me, this idea that engineering can bridge science, so what's out there, and society. What do we do about it? So I'll tell you my passion, where one of the things, we work on several projects in the lab. We work on making new drugs for actually the brain, Alzheimer's disease. So we work on proteins that clog in the brain, and people can't see them, but we work on tools and we work on ways to detect them early so that people don't have to necessarily go years of an undetected disease that before we could only detect, unfortunately, once people passed away. So that's a passion. But my very first passion, and the one that I'm really proud of, again, I grew up in New York City, was driving through the New Jersey Turnpike every summer, every weekend, and seeing that. I would always stare at those plumes of pollution in the air. And then something told me, you can go to the next slide, the other image that I remember having in the next slide was kids that looked like this in my neighborhood all the time. And older adults that look like that. He's wearing an oxygen mask. It's too light, you may not be able to see that. And I would stare at those images, and I would wonder, well, you know, I go to other neighborhoods, and I don't see that. That was something that I noticed very, very early on. So one of my science projects in high school was about air pollution. And I quickly figured out that indeed my observations, what I started by noticing, was actually a national trend. It turns out that in a lot of poor neighborhoods, especially urban neighborhoods, the incidence of asthma, the incidence of lung failure, it's about 2 to 3 times more than the national average. This is the same pattern from older adults, especially those that have had a condition before. You have seen this in recent news. This is why something like COVID hit older populations harder, hit different neighborhoods harder, because this was already something that was there underlying that I grew up seeing every day. So then the question is, well, what does that really look like? My investigations, this is probably a slide that I picked up recently to show you, but probably hasn't changed since the last time I saw this 30 years ago in my 8th grade project, right? You can see, what I want you to notice is all those red flags, high. Visits to the ER because of asthma, high. Visits to the for adults and for children. Asthma hospitalization, high. They're all high relative to the national average. So when you think about it, I really went to school and I really was driven by something. This is one example of those problems. And I wanted to learn more about what people can't see. You can't see your air. It's remarkable how you can actually develop tools to measure what's something in the air, every particle that we can see that's here right now. So in my lab, we have built a chamber probably as big as this room, and we have it connected with lung cells. And as I'll tell you, we do quite a lot of experimentation, bringing air samples, replicating it in a room like this, and starting to answer the question of what are the health effects of these type of pollutants. And so that's what I'll tell you today, but one of the things, this is Austin. This is real data that in conjunction with one of our medical school collaborators, we have collected. And you can see something like black carbon, who's emitted by pretty much every car that's out there, and power plants and fossil fuels, a whole bunch of stuff. And what you can see is that if you measure this particulate matter that you probably start to hear more and more in the news, this PM 2.5, you can see a heat map of Austin, and you can see that even in a big city like Austin, it's concentrated to certain neighborhoods, right? It's concentrated to neighborhoods near highways and restaurants and all these things. And then you kind of begin to understand this is just one trend, right? There are gases that contribute to air pollution. There are metals. There are plastics that we're using that are affecting kids that are in our food. There is traffic. There are sources that are affecting foods that we're, crops that we're eating and in the waters that we're growing it. So this has been extremely fascinating and a driving aspect of my career. So this was one of my early inspiring problems. Now, I love biology, and I wanted to be a doctor, and I took the MCATs, and I was a double major, and I wanted to go to med school, and I was ready to go. So the challenge became, how do I turn that love of science and measuring the invisible and what I cannot see and connect it to people and people's lives and biology and medicine? And so what I started getting more and more with my bio background was more into biotechnology. So I really wanted to understand particulate and air chemistry and all of that, but I particularly wanted to understand how it comes all the way into your body when you breathe it. Especially the smaller particles, the more likely to penetrate your blood, your body, your ovaries, your pregnancy, your brain, and how does that translate into diseases? So now we know that a lot of these particulate matters, a lot of pollution is connected to respiratory issues, to cardiovascular issues, to mental disorders, to nervous system disorders. We've already known that. I don't know if you've been paying attention, but curiously, about 2 years ago, the first birth certificate ever that listed air pollution as a cause of death was actually issued. So it's a growing concern worldwide. And again, more morbid statistics that we're not going to worry about, but I just want you to know it's not just lung issues. This affects quite a lot of health issues, and you may not even know it. Okay? So what we have been working on, it's really several things in my lab that can be applied to this very real problem. So so the first thing we've been doing is collecting lots of air pollution samples in Texas, out of Texas, with collaborators in other cities. And what we have been doing with this is there are several ways we're collecting this. As I mentioned to you, this is our chamber in the back. And our chamber, again, is probably the size of this room. And our chamber can actually produce chemically any kind of mixture of compounds that we want that would mimic the air out there. So if you tell me what your air looks like, I probably can mimic it in our chamber. We can measure, we can characterize it, and then we have this air-liquid interface that we built that works a lot like the lungs. It's between the air and liquid, so you submerge your lung tissue there, just like they would in the fluids of the body, and you roll and pass your air pollutants in there, and then you ask the question, what's going on with the lung cells, right? Where do we see the first markers of disease emerging? If we move on, the second thing we've been doing is we have been accepting in our labs characterized PM samples from anybody that wants to collect it. National labs, communities, anybody. And now that we have a system to measure that, they can send it to our lab and we can give them some information about what they cannot see, about what they're breathing every day. So we take it, we submerge it in cells, and we have markers that tell them, yeah, maybe you want to look at X, Y, and Z and make some changes because there's a lot of health threats there. And the last thing here, when it comes to these collection, we can go to the next one, is we actually, this is my students' favorite part, we have designed little filters, and don't ask me why they started putting it in all the bars around Austin, but they started in all the bars around Austin, and we can collect information about air pollution around our city and get to maps like that. And as you can see, we can measure lots of different metals, lots of different things that are going around in our air. If we can move on. The second thing that we have been doing, and we can move on, is measuring the impacts of these mixtures on on lung health. So we can move on. Again, I explained to you how these things get into our system and distribute everywhere in our cells. So if we can move on, we get samples from those lung cells, and one of the things we can do is titrate their concentrations and begin to answer questions like at what concentrations do these compounds become toxic to our lungs. So this is an example here just to show you they're diesel samples we've gotten from places in Texas. There's fine urban examples. So these are from urban places around Texas. And we can actually measure viability curves and start beginning to see what's the threshold of toxicity to these cells. We can also look at other interesting markers, like DNA markers, and start understanding when the DNA and the genetic functions of the cells, so they're not dying, but their regulatory system is completely getting sick and deviating from what DNA is normally supposed to do. So new genes are getting encoded, old genes that should get encoded are not. So this is another marker that we've developed. And then what do we do with these markers? So this is now a recent collaboration that we've started, if we move to here. So the idea was that we would collect all these early markers of toxicity for the lung, things that have to do with cells, things that have to do with more molecular markers like DNA and oxidation and modifications to molecules where we know air pollution can change their chemistries in our bodies. And if we go to the next slide, yeah, we can do a lot of clicks. For some reason, this one is animated. Yeah, but there's different ways to measure that. So what our lab has been doing is saying, well, you know what, one measure of these has not been enough. It's not sensitive enough, especially to the new pollutants that are emerging every day with new technologies. So what we want to do is a multi-level platform where we take all these things together, and now we have a much more sensitive assay. And if we go to the next slide, lots of genes now that we've annotated and found that are particularly responsive to some of these plastics, some of these metals. And if we go to the next slide, and one of the really interesting things we found, and this is probably one of the last science things I'll show you, is that these cells begin to actually change shape. Now, why is that exciting from a technology perspective? Because now we have translated something invisible like air pollution effects to something that we can see on a microscope. And what's really exciting about this, if we go to the next slide, is the building of these new technologies that we're doing. So if you go to the next one, this is a microfluidic device that we just prototyped and built our first one. Has a couple of channels, about 6 different channels. Anybody in the community can use that and has been using that. So you can put in your microfluidic different compositions, and you can make little air pollution or nanotubes, and you can immediately send samples where you can evaluate the air you see. So our vision of that, if we go to the next slide, is that this is really almost as easy as a pregnancy test. You have suspicions about what you can see in your air, in your kitchen, in your house, in your apartment, in your community. Here's a device, test it. That's what's guiding this vision. It's really this idea of turning a problem and giving our communities more control into how to mitigate it. So we can move forward probably here and skip a little. And so, again, this is super exciting. We started to work with the American Lung Cancer Screening Initiative. And we're working with some of our devices, working with them to get them in the communities to understand how this can work together. And this is the doing good for others piece. And the doing good for me piece is that it's a problem I always dreamed of solving. And I'm not saying we will solve it, but it's a problem I am so excited to be contributing with to the skill sets I have. My dream is one day I can go back to where I grew up and give every one of those households with every one of those kids that I used to see in mask one of these devices so that they can make their own local changes and they can start understanding and have their own power as to how to monitor the chemistry around them. So challenges are always going to be there, and I'm going to start kind of wrapping up. And so the struggle is always there. So again, you embark even on a problem like this. When I started working on this problem, I didn't know anything about lung cells. It was scary, it was tough, it was intimidating. And so that's probably a lot of what you feel when you take those tougher classes and you feel like you can't do it and you may not be able to do it, and balancing responsibility. I echo the challenge of being a mom scientist. It's hard. Sometimes you get home and you're thinking of lung and devices, and the kids want you to talk about the last Paw Patrol scene that they saw, and that brain has to move quick and write down I always have something to write down because I don't know when I'm going to get interrupted and I'm going to lose it, the idea. So I draw a lot and I put it away, and then I'm mom, and then I'm back to science, and then I'm back to washing the dishes. So that balance of responsibilities, aging parents, having now more responsibilities to take care of. So it's tough, and it's always going to be tough. But again, if you have that light up moment that you wake up to every day, it becomes a lot easier. And so we're running out of time a little. I'm not going to delay too much, so we can move forward. And I'm just going to say, I think you've heard me saying this, it's also okay to pivot. It's also okay to change. And the one thing I have been learning is that everybody advocates for themselves. So that's the one thing I want to tell a lot of you in that room, that I think it's really hard for a lot of us to do that. And I think I just want to challenge you. In addition to your support systems that it's good to have, your friends, and asking questions, it's also really okay to learn how to advocate for ourselves. I'm still learning that. So that's my new part of my growth, professional growth. My dean just told me last week, have you told your department chair all these publications? And no, well, everybody does that. And I was shocked, like if it was something new. So advocate for yourself. We can move on. Find your people, get experience, try new things. You don't know what's gonna light you up, but that light, it's so important to go through those ups and downs all the time. And I have to tell you, I've gotten some community college students in my lab that have done amazing. So it's a non-traditional path, but it is at the same time very traditional. We get a lot of students. People do great things. Alex just graduated from our lab, Austin Community College, 1% award. She just got a National Science Foundation, which 1% of all the students in all the colleges around the United States get in this country. So you are getting a good education. You're fighting hard for what you're learning. So that sense that something is impossible really shouldn't be there. Get somebody to knock you and lock you out of it, right? And just so there's special strengths that you build, and one of them is resilience, as we heard, resourcefulness, groundness, etc. So I'm going to go to the end, but if you consider UT Austin, you can always contact me. Start early, great reasons to expand and go there. Great research, great education, big city, although I know leaving East Austin can be hard. I've enjoyed my one night here, but we will take care of you if you come to UT Austin. And then, to close up, we can move on to the very end. We started with this journey and the story of somebody very simple, noticing things, wanting to be good, and I do want to remind you, it's easier to see where it's harder to see where the engineers are, relative to the medical doctors that help you when you're sick, relative to the professors that, help you learn. But engineering is a huge field, and it really needs all of us, right? It really needs people that are gonna bring different problems. It really means people that are gonna bring different empathy to different things. And so in my case, it was air pollution. In your case, might be the huge rate incidence of rural women that give birth much earlier than women in the cities. Whatever your issue is, it's gonna need AI people caring about how do you interact with older generations that are afraid of technology so that they don't get left behind. And I'll close by telling you the story of my student, Katie, one of my first graduate students that I had 15 years ago. I just had lunch with her this week. Katie got her PhD in chemical engineering, was one of the people, had a huge paper, huge discovery, making a technology that actually allows you to uncover new molecules that will kill pathogens, will kill bacteria that come to the lung. Katie used her skills, analytical skills and what she built to go and start Bible schools in Malaysia. And Katie just came back to the country and is now running a company that uses AI to translate the Bible to every single rural nation that she'd met around the world. So that's what Katie works on. So you never know what you're going to end up using your love of technology, your skill sets, your analytical skill sets, and your passions for. So with that, again, thank you for having me here today. I just have a thank you slide at the end, I think. And I'm sorry about the technology hiccups, but hopefully we can still take one or two questions. So thank you. John, sometimes it's like a mom. You have grad students, you just don't ask too many questions. You take the data, you take the sample, not too many questions. The what can I? Yeah. Well, it's not so much about the bar, it's about where the bars are located. So they put these sensors on the roof. I mean, so you, again, if you ask questions, how do you know the owner? How does the owner let you put this on the roof? There's a lot of questions I've had, but that's how they collect a lot, because they're located in very different parts of the city. That's right, in that particular area. That's right. Who knows? Who knows? Okay, yes, question. To advocate for yourself means two things. Number one, you're keeping track of your stories. You're keeping track of what you're doing. You're keeping track of how hard you're working. You're keeping track of your strengths, track of your weaknesses. And number two, which is the hardest part, you're willing to tell it. If it's a strength, you're willing to say, hey, I'm really getting good about this, and advocate, self-promote yourself. And if it's a weakness, you're willing to ask for what you need, which is also hard, because everybody out there pretends that things just come from heaven and they have it. So to me, that's what advocating means. You know you, so you're paying attention, the good and the bad, the strengths and the weaknesses, and you're willing to tell it, to say how good you are, because, there's a lot of us that are doing a lot of good things, but it's scary to say it. And if you're missing something and you need something, your willingness to ask for it and assume and know that it's okay to ask for something or not to have it. That's, to me, is what I've been learning the hard way, right? Yeah. Okay, well, thank you all.
Maybe We're between classes, so I imagine there's going to be some more folks coming in. If not, this is a good crowd anyway. So if you see a bunch of people enter or a bunch of people leave, it's probably because they're going to classes. So our next speaker is quite a bit different than the first two in a lot of ways. I've known her for a long time. She is my academic sister, not my biological sister. We both did our PhD at the University of Tennessee, Knoxville, in the same research lab, so we are academic siblings. But she's been at Commerce for a long time.
Just over 20 years.
20 plus years. It's now East Texas A&M,
Yes, it is.
not
Got the
Commerce
short
anymore.
period.
So a little bit different, and so we're going from medical and kind of medical, chemical engineering, but with a medical swing, to ecology. And then we'll swing back to pharmacy after Lani's done. So, sorry, we've got a ghost town at the moment, but transitioning classes. Thank her for coming, and I'll give you the stage.
All right. And I'm not used to having a microphone, so guess I may as well get started. Yes, this will probably be a little different from the previous talks, but I may as well get rolling here. Yes, I am currently at East Texas A&M University. I did not think to include the recruitment slides at the end of my talk, but I do have information for anybody who's useful and brought little cards to leave. So if any of you have students that are interested, I've got that stuff. But I guess we may as well get rolling. Yes, a Serpentine Road to Science is my title. I can go ahead and move it to the first slide then. Oops. So I just tell you when to forward?
Yeah, no boredom. He said if you go to the mic, so people, so we can get on live stream.
Okay, I think I'm at the mic. I'm not used to it, so I'll remember to get back up here. All right, so, and yes, there are actually two reasons I chose this title, a serpentine path, because both referring to that winding path that sometimes life takes, and the reference to, of course, snakes, which are my main focus. I have been a student of snake behavior for pretty much all my life, although that has, again, taken some winds here and there. And for the images here, again, a good serpentine road would be Lombard Street in San Francisco, which is, for one thing, very close to where I grew up. I grew up near San Francisco, just south of San Francisco, so near home. And there is a reason it's that winding. It's basically, you could not drive down the street if it were a straight line because it would be too steep. So there is a purpose for the winding of that road. But it along the way became a beautiful scenic route, as well as having a purpose for its twists and turns. Oh, holding it, sure. Oh, there we go. Okay, so this is different? Okay. All right, so this is working better. All right, so there's my kind of reason for the winding road there. And then, of course, I had to also have a snake image. So this is one of my current snakes, who I call Judy, short for Judge Judy, because she just sits in her tank and stares at me like she's judging. And snakes are also kind of not a straight line, and my path to studying them has not been a straight line, and yet they've been with me at every turn. Next slide, please. And this is indeed a question I have frequently gotten throughout my life. Why did it have to be snakes? I've heard this from parents, employers, students, pretty much the whole way. Why snakes? Next slide, please. So I may as well kind of go back to the start. Like I said, long winding road, right? The far picture there you see is with little boxcar houses. This is the kind of place I really did grow up in. A little place, Daly City, just below San Francisco. Not a whole lot of wildlife there, except things that would get into your backyard. And guess what? One of those things were garter snakes. And I couldn't really go out and catch the birds I saw at the bird feeder, but I could catch the little snakes and handle them and watch them and ask my mother repeatedly to keep one as a pet. And she always said no. I didn't know how to take care of it, and it would die and I'd feel bad. And so I started studying how to take care of a snake and observing them, putting them in little tanks and trying to convince them to eat, and finding out that I really enjoyed learning about them and just watching them do things. And of course, here's my folks. I think that's, I was getting ready to go to college. So my very, very patient parents who put up with the mice in the freezer and snakes in the basement. And my very first garter snake she let me keep, who ended up living to the ripe old age of 14 and having many babies along the route, even though originally she said I could keep it for a day. So, so yeah, growing up, snakes were always with me. Now, what I was going to do about it, I didn't really know. I was growing up in the 70s, okay? I went to college in the 80s. What do you do to work with snakes as a grown-up? Veterinarian? Zookeeper? I just actually figured I'd be an artist because I was very good at drawing the whole time. But I'd like to do something with snakes. And, veterinarian, well, but then you're dealing with sick animals all the time and their owners. Not for me, okay? So I guess I'll be a zookeeper or an artist, right? It's growing up. Until that fateful day as a junior in high school, when I was working on a science fair project, plotting the genetics of my snake's babies. And you turn to slides, met the first of my mentors. Next slide, please. Yeah. Right at the top there. These are my two mentors through college. And Harry Green there at University of California, Berkeley, was willing to meet with a high school kid and her mother one weekend and talk about snakes and show me the Museum of Vertebrate Zoology at the university. And I just walked around totally agog. It's like, you can actually do this for a living? Wow, how do I do that? How do I get where you are? So he said, well, come to school here and get a degree. I said, okay. And so I did. And so, it's like, cool, take that opportunity, And that's also one of the questions I always tell students. If you see someone doing something you'd like to do, ask them how they got there. And maybe you can do that too, right? So yeah, I went to Berkeley and got my undergraduate working with Harry. Wonderful opportunities, field trips, taking care of his animals is one of my first jobs. It was much better than selling toilets at Montgomery Wards, which was my other job. But, and then what was I going to do next? And I didn't really know. Now, I did come to that fork in the road where it was either science or art, and decided they both took a lot of lab time, and I picked science. Okay, so, well, I can draw in my spare time, right? So I stuck with the science part. But yeah, sometimes you have to make those decisions too, right? And then what next? And he recommended his mentor, Gordon Burghardt, over at Tennessee, who's the lower C in there, whose specialization is in behavior, animal behavior, utilizing mostly garter snakes in the laboratory. And now all this time with Harry does a lot of field work, and it's like, oh, this exciting stuff. You can go to South America and catch bushmasters and all these big, fancy, dangerous snakes. I worked with rattlesnakes in his lab with him. So I had kind of dreams of field work and, cool animals, right? It's like, well, okay, but I had learned good skills here working with Gordon on how to measure behavior, which, by the way, was another little twist, because starting in, I was assuming, once again, assumptions can be dangerous, that, okay, everybody I'm hanging out with is studying systematics and classification and morphology, and I was already having some issues with, but do I really want to study my animals by kind of dissecting them? And, I'd rather watch them. Oh, duh. Again, a couple of classes, and even the first one, I actually didn't even do that well in animal behavior. It's like, oh, there are ways you can study behavior for real? Okay, another little veering on that path. Okay, and sure enough, it's like, Gordon can get me further on that path. Okay, we'll keep going there. Very good. And so off I went to Knoxville, Tennessee, and studied with Gordon. And while there, once again, more ideas about big fancy snakes, right? And the garter snakes that I'd started with. It's like, how do I keep coming back to these garter snakes, right? But when all was said and done, I ended up sticking with that path. And I'll actually come back a little bit more on that in another slide or two. I frankly don't remember what order I put these in at the moment. But of course, another thing that happened was right on those stairs you see is where I met my, who would be my husband. The first day I was on campus, kind of walking past him, I was with a friend, and she said, hey, you two ought to talk about, Lonnie's new, you guys ought to talk about carpooling. He said, oh, cool, come on over for dinner tonight, we'll talk about it. As he likes to phrase it, I came over for dinner and never left. So there was another little curve in that path, right? But next slide, please. I do frequently get asked, well, did you do anything else? Sure, actually I did. I did finally get a chance to try out that artist thing. I got to work as a concept artist for a computer, excuse me, for a computer game company back in the early, mid-90s. These are some samples of the concept art I did. That game company is defunct. I occasionally do see my, one of the few pictures I got that actually went all the way to production was War Dogs and Armor. I occasionally do see those pop up in other games because they sold off everything. But I also did learn that I don't have the temperament for being an artist for hire. So I made a good choice sticking with science. Next slide. Hmm? Then, of course, there's the other question, has it always been snakes? Just snakes? Only snakes? Didn't you try other organisms? Well, I mean, doing behavior, sure, you could do other organisms, and I have. I've done, most of what I've done with rodents was actually genetic. I've worked with hissing roaches. I actually did a project with preferences for formula flavors in neonate pigs. One of my first published papers is actually on that little worm-like thing in there. It's actually a caecilian, a legless form of amphibian. It was very poorly known. Hey, I did get to have some artwork in that publication, by the way, because I illustrated the baby caecilians that I had. The alligators, including some of the fun you have with baby alligators is that they like to eat things that they shouldn't, like the cat collars that are in those baby gators. I do have a tendency to be thought of, I called veterinary offices and they think I'm a crank call. That's a whole nother story, right? It's like, yeah, sure, she's got alligators that ate a cat collar. Uh-huh, yeah, there it is, okay. No cats were involved. The alligators were wearing the collars. It is the same alligator in two views, by the way. It wasn't two alligators that ate collars. But yeah, I've actually worked with a variety of other animals. But, next slide. Keeps coming back to snakes. Still my favorites. Fascinating animals. These are all snakes that I've had and worked with, by the way. We've got a couple of pythons, some very small snakes, some very dumb snakes, like the one on the far end that is literally eating its own tail. Didn't get very far in that attempt. But next slide. So why snakes? Well, a little bit of science, okay? Not all about my path, but yeah, they're actually perfectly good animals to work with. They are a vertebrate that's built like a tube. And they've got very specialized ways of dealing with life between the jaws and their sensory structures. Their behavior is actually much more complicated than a lot of people give them credit, including more and more looks at social behavior that are coming out there. There's lots of different kinds of snakes. And for what I'm most fascinated in, which is kind of the development of behavior, that lack of parental care is actually kind of useful because you can really measure the difference between the instinctive, genetically coded part of their behavior and what changes with experience. There's no, time period where they have to be raised by a parent or even in a womb where they're being influenced by their parent. So that's kind of a cool thing to be able to allow you to measure. Next slide. And they're pretty. I mean, I think they're very pretty. Next slide. My specialty has always been feeding behavior. It's, to me, fascinating. Lots of what they do is fascinating, but this is where I focus in. And for one thing, well, gee, everything eats. And this is something that they're motivated about. So you can usually get them to do things for you, as long as you're clever enough to, do them in ways that allow you to continue doing this. And again, there's different kinds of snakes. There's species differences. They are snakes that live in different habitats, that eat different things. And again, that whole thing about learned differences. Again, one of those things that's been underappreciated in snakes is their flexibility. Garter snakes fit all of that. Next slide. So another, one of those, it'd have to be garter snakes thing. Again, hearkening back to those plans and curves I mentioned earlier on, I was, had dreams of field work and big, exciting, or dangerous snakes, right? On the far side, there's another one of our academic brothers there, siblings, Jesus Rivas with the anaconda. I actually took a little sidetrack there as grad student. My initial plan had been to just get a master's with Gordon and then go to a field program for the PhD. But again, life throws you curveballs sometimes, and you make adjustments. Two major things came into play there. Okay, one, I did have some health issues that made it more of a challenge to do field work kind of things. And two, I was just better in the lab than in the field, which again, didn't know until I started doing it, right? I love being outside, tromping around looking for things, but I was actually not very talented at it. But in the lab, taking care of these study animals and collecting data, fine-tuned methodologies, I was actually good at that. So, okay, I'll stay here. I'll do the PhD right here with Gordon. And again, kind of a major path from what I thought I wanted to do to what ended up being kind of the better path for me. And that's true for everybody. Sometimes where you think you want to go, it's perfectly good to shoot that way, but be aware of what else is going on and what other paths might be opening, and be prepared and willing to change your mind occasionally. Try something else. You may find something else that you're even better at or like even better. And it's not a failure if you don't get what you thought you wanted. One kind of important thing is enjoying what you're doing along the way. If you're miserable, maybe you've gotten too far off a good path for yourself, right? So try things, but then, yeah, don't be as afraid of those twists and turns. And so I end up back where I started with teeny little garter snakes in labs, and now at my house. Next slide. So good old garter snakes. And they're a great species. There's actually quite varied. There are fish specialists, there are worm specialists, there are aquatic specialists, and they're actually much more active foragers than a lot of kinds of snakes, so they're more doing things. I've had a great time working with them. And I'm not sure if this is my last slide, or last real slide. Is there another one? Yeah, there is. That's kind of a closing for kind of my slide works. But the whole thing there is, again, that whole path, I took turns that I kind of grabbed when I saw them become available. A lot of things I didn't even know were options, right? And I was willing to go for that. I changed my mind a few times, okay? A few things didn't end up being quite as straightforward as I thought. You gotta be willing to shift, okay? I did spend about 12 years working at Mississippi University for Women in Mississippi. That's where our first jobs were, before we decided with a young son that it was time to move on, and that's when we came to Texas. So yeah, I've also done the balancing, having a kid who's now going on 30, living in California, and I've got a grandbaby that's turning 1 at the end of the month. So there's been things to balance all the way along. And I think I'm the oldest person speaking today, so I no longer have that active laboratory. I really have enjoyed research, as I think you could tell from my talk, and have trained many, many students, first only undergraduates at my first job, and then at Texas, still mostly undergraduates because of the kinds of work we do, lots of honor students and a couple of thesis students, before I retired my lab and just full-time went to teaching. Because once again, the kind of work I do was getting more and more difficult to sustain without getting bigger and more ambitious than I really wanted to go. I prefer a lower stress life, as it were. So I backed down and just put my focus more into teaching, which was always kind of what I was doing too. Most of my research progress was done in training of students. So we'd do small projects, sure, but we'd learn lots of things, but it was getting them, learning how to science and things they could put on their resume, things they could learn how to give presentations. Okay, but again, climates change, the department's emphasis changes a little bit, so it's like, I'd rather put my focus still on the students. And so I retired the lab. I still play an active role in other people's committees and research, and kind of helping students fine-tune their methodologies, especially when it comes to behavior and reptiles, things like that. But I don't have that added headache of my own lab. So I don't have something to, come work in my lab aspect. Okay? But teaching is rewarding too. And sometimes it's hard to balance both research and teaching because they both take a lot of your time. Okay? And at this point, I'm fine with just doing the teaching. I've got my retired lab animals at home with me, like Judy there. And I'll never kind of give up that. I mean, heck, I kind of have thoughts of, after retirement, going back into a little research again. just because I enjoy it. That's more of, I'd like research for a hobby. Can I do that? But it's kind of in the blood, right? But that's kind of my winding path and some of the twists and turns I've gone through. And again, advice for anybody, starting on their path. Watch for what comes available. Don't be afraid to try new things. Don't be afraid to change your mind. Failing is not a problem. Failing means you tried something, okay? You might fail several times before you get something right. That's in general when you're learning stuff, right? Okay? Don't get too hung up on one thing not working out, because something else may be just waiting around the corner. And don't be too proud to go back to your roots sometimes, too. A few little garter snakes peeking out of a hide there, waiting impatiently for me to bring their plate of food in. Or for anybody who's got any questions for me. And yeah, I guess my last shout out, since again, I know we do get transfer students come up to East Texas A&M now. Used to be A&M Commerce. And we do have a very active wildlife and conservation science program, which is of course the one that I'm most closely involved in, as well as our straight biology program, which has lots of medical and health sciences emphasis in it, and an environmental science program. I have brought flyers if anybody would like to take those back to your classes, or any students would like them, with further information on all those pathways. And the fellow who runs our wildlife and conservation science did point out that we've got more female students in that program right now than male. And so wouldn't be in poor company. I think lots more women over the years in science. Yes, indeed. I mean, I'm here long enough that I've seen the ratios shift. I was weird when we started out. There were not many women. There were some, of course. There were some real powerhouse female herpetologists out there. Okay, but there were still fewer in the numbers. I was kind of one of the oddballs. There were a lot more guys. Okay, and both of my mentors, you might say, they're both old bearded white guys, but they couldn't have been more caring and supportive. And I did meet some other folks along the route that weren't so much, that I'm glad I did not work in their labs. But things have improved, so let's keep that trend going, right? I was the kid who scared the boys on the playground with the salamanders, instead of the other way around. So yeah, if you're weird, go for it. But there's more and more women doing science. Keep it up, don't be afraid. Support those who want to go there. And does anybody actually have any questions for me? Yes?
Everyone is afraid of snakes. You show me a snake in my yard and I'm going to panic. But does Eastern Texas have much poisonous snake, and have you taken care of it?
I have cared for some venomous snakes. Now, of course, the technically poisonous is if you eat it and it makes you sick. Venomous is if it bites you and you're sick. But luckily, the venomous snakes in the U.S. are not very lethal. I mean, you still don't want to get bitten by them. I mean, rattlesnakes are predominantly, and a few cottonmouths and copperheads, but they have more of a digestive enzyme type venom. So there's tissue damage, so you don't want to get bitten by them. But very few people actually die of it. So at one level, there's a little bit of don't panic quite so much, because it's usually not as bad as people think. And you're much more likely to see a non-venomous snake. So one of the best things is just, kind of learn to identify the few venomous snakes. But either way, just kind of stay back and it'll go away. As an undergrad, I worked with rattlesnakes, with baby rattlesnakes. So I did learn how to handle them safely. There's a whole other level of training that goes with making sure you're handling them safely, because non-venomous snakes, I don't really mind if they bite me. It might bigger they are, the more it's going to hurt. So I get more careful. I mean, the little garter snakes, it's like, you're going to be hanging off my fingers. It's like, but get a little bigger. And it's like, this one's going to hurt. I'm going to be more careful, right? But the venomous ones, there's a whole nother level. But how they're handled has changed a lot. And used to, the way I learned was, if you had to handle them by hand, you had to pin them. Now there's beautiful use of tubes that make it much safer for both the handler and the snake, which is big in my book too. They're much less stressed. But as a study animal and working with students, oh heck no, way too much liability. So I just stick to the non-venomous for any of my work since then, but they're fascinating animals. Any other questions, comments?
When I first started working in the lab and did your PhD, and Gordon had a bunch of these Asian pit vipers,
The habu.
and I think one of the other students had created a cage, Mark Waters, for them, that they go into this little hiding hole on the bottom, and then you would close the lid so they couldn't get out and stick them in the fridge. So that if you decrease their body temperature, they weren't as nasty as they were. And at that immediate moment, I knew I never wanted to work with venomous snakes. If I'm having to take all these precautions, or the zookeeper at the Knoxville Zoo who told me he was cleaning a green mamba's cage, and he opened it up and went in to reach for the mamba with a hook, which I didn't know why he was doing that. And he said he blinked his eye and the thing had gone over him, over his shoulder, and was on the other side of the room before he knew it. And I said, okay, I'll stick with the non-venomous snakes. Just these examples. Are there coral snakes? Are they common? Because those are different venom.
There are coral snakes in Texas. They're extremely rarely found because they're very secretive. They hide, and they're relatively small. They do have the venom more like that of, they're related to cobras, so they have a different kind of venom. Even when they're found, it's hard to be bitten by them because they're small. So, I mean, I'm never saying that there's zero chance of being bitten by the venomous snakes, because there is. But it's pretty rare. And usually when folks find a coral snake, it's like, oh boy, I found a coral snake. Rather than the opposite. Once again, there's things that kind of look like them. So, they're pretty. Oh, I'm sorry?
The scarlet king snake's even more rare than the coral snake. And they said, the red touches yellow kills fellow, and the red touches black, you're okay, Jack?
Red and yellow kill a fellow, red and black, venom black, which only works for the coral snakes in the United States, by the way. If you go south of the border, there's, far more color patterns of the coral snakes. Anything else?
The last thing I'm going to say is, in addition to going into academia, if you're interested in ecology, behavior, evolution, do you have a lot of students go to like Texas Parks and Wildlife?
Indeed, yeah. The wildlife and conservation sciences there. Yeah, we have lots of students actually that go into work with Texas Parks and Wildlife, also private companies. There's a lot of management companies out there. Again, I'm kind of not on that end of things, so I kind of forgot about that. Thanks for reminding me. So yeah, I've seen lots of students going into that kind of line. We kind of have two subgroups of students in that program, and there's they tend to follow the urban versus rural backgrounds. Especially among the women, we have mostly more urban students who are interested in conservation aspects of this, whereas the more rural groups is more of the guys, and it's more the hunting side of things. So also, of course, there's game management and whatnot. Kind of despite sometimes you get pretty loud arguments between these groups, when it boils down to it, they're working for the same thing. So maintaining ecosystems and organisms. But Anything else? I know I'm coming close to I've got to be around the end of my block here. Somebody else is coming up soon, right? Oh, sorry, yes?
Just wondering if you can share with us a little bit of how you balance the science and being a mom.
Ooh, that definitely was a struggle at times. I really did meet some colleagues that were not supportive, and others that were. Frankly, that's one of the reasons I left Mississippi, I must say, because there was less support for the time I needed for being the mom of a small child. And it was growing more problematic. Yeah, I you just, at some levels, yeah, like you were saying, you kind of just do this, play the switch, and kind of go back, mom mode, then go back to work mode. I must say, my kid had a great time helping me grade quizzes and things as he was a little bit older. So, he'd try to outdo my students. So, got to overlap a little bit, but yeah. I think it is better. Yes, yeah, definitely. And I think it's the people who are most vocally problematic, I don't think would be the ones being listened to anymore. And I think that in that way, things have changed for the better. I think I probably need to get on off the stage at this point. Thank you all.
In this way, that just came on out of nowhere. So thank you this is our last talk of the day, and I appreciate everyone that's here, and we'll let Dr. Brown get going.
Good morning, y'all. My name is Dr. Brown. I'm coming here from the UT Fish College of Pharmacy. We're located just down the road in Tyler, so we were the first pharmacy school in East Texas. So keeping it local in East Texas. Happy to be here, bringing up the rear, so I'm glad to see y'all here. I'll go into a little bit how to get into the pharmacy school. But first, I just kind of want to tell you a little bit about what I do. You'll see this picture right here. I tried to make this look like me as much as possible because I love to laugh, and so I made myself into a meme. And so I am not your typical pharmacist. I see patients, I see my own patients, and I see them in the doctor's office, okay? So I see some confused looks. You're like, oh, why is the pharmacist seeing me at the doctor? That's because I am an ambulatory care pharmacist, okay? I personally work in primary care, but we have a bunch of different specialties that we work in. Okay, so if we'll go to the next slide, maybe. That's all right. The next slide's just pictures, really. The first picture on there is going to be me as an M&M, because I still love to laugh and make myself into a meme. M&Ms have nothing to do with Chef Boyardee or ladybugs. It's just me, Dr. Brown M&M. But 2 of my patients have things to do with Chef Boyardee and ladybugs. So I'll tell you 2 quick stories about some patients that I take care of. The first one, with our Chef Boyardee up there, brings me back to a type 1 diabetes patient that I had. We'll call her Stacy. Okay? So, just like I'm not your average pharmacist, Stacy wasn't your average type 1 diabetes patient either. Stacy was an Air Force veteran, but she was in a plane crash that knocked out her pancreas. So whereas regular type 1 diabetes patients, they don't make insulin because their body forgot or attacked itself for its insulin factories. Well, for hers, she got into an accident and it knocked out her pancreas. So, being diabetic is a little new for Stacy. By the time she gets to me, she's had several scary low blood sugars, and she's really hesitant to give herself insulin shots. For somebody who doesn't make insulin, like our type 1 diabetes patients, if you don't take insulin, you don't live. Okay? So I really needed her to take her insulin. So through a series of phone calls, a series of conversations, building that relationship with Stacy, I finally got her to take about 3 units of insulin with her cup of Chef Boyardee, which she ate every day after getting off work at 3 o'clock in the morning. After we got her to check her blood sugar and take 3 units of insulin with her largest meal of the day, her blood sugar got a lot better, and she was finally able to have a surgery that she needed to improve her quality of life, because she was having a lot of pain and she needed surgery. But it was considered an elective surgery, and they would not do it until her blood sugar got under control. So, by seeing her pharmacist, I was working in the endocrinology clinic at the time, by working with her pharmacist, the medication experts, she was able to get that surgery that she really needed. By working with her, instead of against her, about her fears of taking insulin. So that's Stacy's story. The next story that I want to tell you about my patients has to do with ladybugs. Not because we had ladybugs in the clinic, that's disgusting. So we'll call her Anna. So Anna comes to clinic with her caretaker, because Anna has cognitive delays, and so she needs help taking care of herself. So she comes to my clinic to get her blood checked. Now, it's not her blood sugar that we're checking for this patient. It's her blood thinner, because Anna has AFib. And so she comes every few weeks, once a month if we're doing really good, to get her blood checked to make sure that it's thin enough to where the AFib won't clot her up, but not too thin to where she doesn't bleed out. So I'm talking to Anna. I'm saying, hey, we're checking your blood. She's like, I'm coming to see the ladybug. I said, we don't have ladybugs in clinic. What is this ladybug? It's the dot of blood on the gauze after I prick her finger to check her blood thinner levels. So she comes to see the ladybug because Anna doesn't actually understand why she comes to the doctor. So I ask her, I'm saying, Anna, do you know what this is? No, I just come to see the ladybug. I said, okay. So you come to see the ladybug because you have AFib, atrial fibrillation. That means that the top part of your heart beats like this, sometimes. When it wants to act right and beat like this, because it was doing this, the blood gets caught and it clots. When it wants to act right, that'll push the clot to your brain. That's a stroke, that's bad. And she's like, oh, okay. And then her caregiver looks at me and she says, nobody has ever explained this to her before. And she actually gets it. So now Anna knows why she comes to the doctor to see the ladybugs. And when patients know what their medicine does for them, they're a whole lot likely to take it how they should. Okay? So, pharmacists, particularly pharmacists who see patients directly, our bread and butter was with checking blood thinner levels. Okay? So there's some patients that I take care of. So as an ambulatory care pharmacist, I work in primary care, so I'll use that perspective. I treat a lot of diabetes. It's like the East Texas welcome. I'm from South Carolina, and it's still the South Carolina welcome, but it's got a special Texas flavor here. Okay? So we do a lot of chronic disease management. So I'm not talking about somebody broke their arm and they came to see me. That's an acute injury. I don't do it. I'm not talking about somebody got an ear infection and they come to see me. That's an acute infection. I don't do it. I don't like sick people. I deal with chronic disease, so hypertension, diabetes, chronic anticoagulation like Anna, things like that. I manage their medicines. I also make sure that they get the resources that they need, whether that's a referral to social work, a referral to psychiatry, all kinds of different things. I help them put the pieces together. I teach them a lot about taking their medicines, like with Stacy and why she needs insulin and how I'm not going to tank her blood sugar on purpose. It's a lot of conversation teaching patients how to use the medicines that they really need. Okay? We also do a lot of research. We contribute to the body of knowledge that helps us know what medications are good, which ones are not so good, and how to use the ones that are not so good, but we kind of still need them, okay? We also connect patients with patient assistance programs because medications are expensive, really expensive. Anna can't afford the nice fancy blood thinners that I don't have to prick her finger to measure. She needs the cheap one. That means that she can't eat spinach whenever she wants to, and she has to come get her finger pricked and see the ladybug every month because medications are really expensive. So we help coordinate patients, not only in the pharmacies, but in the doctor's offices to get the medicines that they need through patient assistance programs. Now, this value-based care thing on here can be a little confusing because insurance in the United States is super confusing. So instead of getting paid for doing all the things and seeing all the people and ordering all the tests, we help with value-based care, which means that if all of my patients and their high blood pressure look really good at the end of the year, my doctor's office gets paid more. We help a lot with the coordination of that. So I mentioned all these specialties. So every specialty that you see on this list, a pharmacist can be there, okay? Just like medical doctors, we also do residency for our specialties. So because I'm a primary care pharmacist, I did 2 years of residency, 1 in general practice. I worked at the VA in Charleston. It was great. And then my second one was in outpatient medicine, specifically in family medicine clinics. Just because I'm a primary care pharmacist doesn't mean that I don't interface with all these other pharmacists too. We had a great psychiatric pharmacist at one of my residency sites. We had a great pain management pharmacist. I've worked with all of them. I see all of them. I refer patients to all of them. So they do what I do in the primary care space in all of these specialty cares. So a cardiology pharmacist might be seeing all of the patients who have heart failure because their hearts don't beat strong enough and making sure that they get all the medicine, all the doses that they're supposed to get. So I mentioned residency. This is sort of on the back end of how you get to where I got. The first year residency, general practice, it's typically at hospitals where you're doing inpatient, you're monitoring different levels of different medicines at the hospital. There's some dispensing where I'm handing the medicine to the patients as they leave, things like that. There are also community pharmacy residencies. That's a first-year residency for advanced services, like coordinating, getting those blood levels for Anna out at her community pharmacy so that she doesn't have to drive 30 miles to come see me. And then our second year residencies is where you really specialize. That's how you get to those specialties on the last slide. Okay, so how did I get to here before you? So I mentioned I'm from the Carolinas, go Gamecocks. I went to undergrad at the University of South Carolina in Columbia. Don't come for me, SEC is great. Then I went to pharmacy school at the University of North Carolina. I changed conferences and joined the conference with my undergrad rival. We almost beat them in football when I was there. Okay. Now, I did have a question just a minute ago about prerequisites and how to get into pharmacy school. So, fun fact, you don't have to finish your bachelor's to get into pharmacy school. You actually don't. As long as you do all the prerequisites, and there are some papers out in the foyer with those prerequisites listed, you can get into pharmacy school. Now, if you choose not to finish your bachelor's first, you do have to finish Texas Core if you go to a Texas pharmacy school, but not necessarily for other states. Okay, so I went to pharmacy school. That's 4 years on average. There are some accelerated schools that are 3 years. There are some programs that draw it out. There are some 6-year ones where they take you fresh out of high school, all kinds of things. But most of them are 4 years. That 4 years is mostly in class, about 2.5 to 3 years of sitting in the classroom. But then for our 4th and final year, we go out and try it out in all those different areas of pharmacy practice. All right. So I mentioned my first year residency, that was at the Charleston VA. That was me and my co-residents on the slide prior. There were about 9 of us hanging out and having a good time. My second year residency was at East Tennessee at the college there. So I also teach at the college here. That's where I learned how to do that. And then got my big girl job at UT Tyler. So there are some things after, you go to pharmacy school and get a license and get a specialty that you have to do to keep that up, like CE, continuing education. But for Texas, you submit it every 2 years, so that's kind of nice. They give you time to catch up. You also have to pass your state law exam. So even though I'm not a lawyer, I had to study pharmacy law. It takes a couple weeks to study for it, but they also teach it to you in class. But then there are the things that you get to do. I get to build those long-term relationships with my patients. I get to save lives, keeping Anna from having a stroke, keeping Stacy from having a low blood sugar, or from having a heart attack a few down the years of having a high blood sugar. I get to do those things. I get to problem solve and make new strategies every day. I got to figure out, okay, how do I get this patient this medicine in a way that they're actually going to take it at a price they can actually afford. You get a lot of cool problem-solving opportunities, too. Okay, next. And because you can't eat, sleep, and breathe pharmacy, you actually have to do something else. So I taught myself how to sew right before residency. I made a bunch of scrub caps, but I don't wear scrub caps because I work in the office, not in the hospital. So I gave them to my little sister because she's a psych ward nurse. I love to read. I collect china. So now I invite my students to my office for tea, and we drink out of fancy teacups. It's very fun. Very like 1800s England. And then I also swing dance. So there's a group in Tyler that does that. So I can keep up those hobbies too. Okay? And then once you get past your hobbies, you always got to find a way to keep laughing. Love to laugh. I think pharmacy memes are absolutely hilarious. And they're not always suitable for public display. So I found some ones that are. All right, what questions do you have about ambulatory care pharmacy? Well, question is, how does the patient find me? Excellent question. In the office that I work in a resident clinic. So there are about 60 rotating internal medicine physicians in that clinic. I sit right next to them when they report their cases to their attending physicians, who'd say, okay, check yes, this is good, go to your plan, or no, did you think about this? So in that environment, I just lean over and give them my 2 cents. And then I say, hey, your patient's diabetes is terrible. Please do this. So I really insert myself into the situation there. In an office where there isn't a pharmacist, God forbid that y'all have chronic conditions in our patients, tell your doctor, hey, I saw this great pharmacy presentation, and it sounds awesome. Where's your pharmacist? And they'll be like, what are you talking about? And you'll tell them, I'm not talking about CVS and Walgreens. I'm talking about a primary care pharmacist who sits next to you. But this is, to your point, the worst, best kept secret about the profession of pharmacy. Because I have the best job in the world, and nobody knows about it. More questions?
We can't find you in a local pharmacy, CVS, Walmart.
Exactly. You would find a community pharmacist out in those community pharmacy locations. Now, there are advanced community pharmacy services. So getting a vaccine, having them check your blood pressure for you and sort of talk to you about that. It's a real time constraint, and for reasons that I won't bore you with today, but we're starting the conversation.
Okay, so most of us experience pharmacists through CVS, Walmart, Walgreens, and we get asked, do you want to speak to the pharmacist? I've never said yes. Is there a good reason to say yes?
Yeah, there's a good reason to say yes. It is mandatory counseling in the state of Texas. If you get a brand new prescription, I don't ask you, do you want to speak to the pharmacist? I give the bag to the pharmacist and I say, go over there. So that's required, of course. But people have lots of questions, or they think different things, or they feel different things about their medicine that they don't know to ask about. Okay? So if you're ever, starting a new medicine, you're like, I don't know how this is supposed to make me feel, ask the pharmacist. If, you've been taking a medicine for forever and you don't want to take this medicine for forever, ask the pharmacist. If it's for your blood pressure, take it. There are all kinds of reasons to just ask the pharmacist, hey, what do you think about this? More questions?
Your thoughts as a pharmacist on Ozempic, Mounjaro, Wegovy, for people that are not medically.
The ever-present question. It is safer to provide my professional opinion about that. So there's a nuanced answer to that question. So obesity and overweight are medical conditions, okay? They have a diagnostic criteria, they have monitoring parameters, and it's not just because of what you ate sometimes. So that presents a medical need for weight loss. There are lots of ways to lose weight, some more effective than others. All of these quote-unquote new injectables that people are hearing about are, one, not new. This class of medications has been around since the late 90s. And they're not the only tool in the toolbox. So it depends on how your patient got to the diagnosis of obesity and overweight, in my opinion, for which tool you should select for that job.
Something kind of related to that, companies like Hims or Hers, ones where you can get these medications for erectile dysfunction, for weight loss, for hair loss, for whatever, by not, skipping your doctor, skipping your pharmacist, consulting with their, their own, I guess it's a doctor, I don't know, because you don't see one. How is that viewed by your profession? Like, is that okay, or is that something people should avoid and should go to their doctors instead, or a pharmacist?
So I mentioned that patient relationship that I get to have as an outpatient medicine pharmacist. Community pharmacists also have this relationship, particularly in smaller towns or smaller pharmacies, where you see the same patients all the time, people that know you. I think it's worth having these conversations with people that know you and know your health history and have that background knowledge to be able to interpret it. There was a question right here.
So I have a prescriber and I have a pharmacist just like at Walmart. What's the difference between the two and how do they work?
Good question. Who's the prescriber and who's the pharmacist? Sometimes it's the same person. In the state of Texas, I have prescriptive authority based on a contract that I have with the physicians that I work with. So I send my own orders. But I don't fill my own orders, okay? It's a bit of a conflict of interest, and it's just not good practice of the checks and balances of medicine to write the same prescription that you fill. So that should be a key difference. But for several community pharmacists in several states, those advanced community pharmacy services that I mentioned involve being able to prescribe hormonal contraceptives, administer long-acting injectable medications. One of those is a contraceptive, but they're mostly antipsychotics. And some patient monitoring where they can refill your chronic prescriptions or alter the dose of your chronic prescriptions and then tell your doctor about it later. So ideally, there's a very close relationship there. In actuality, not so much. I think you had a question over there? No? More questions?
I would have thought insulin would have been digested from the stomach and moved before it got the oral out. If you formulate it differently, so it would.
You are correct. You cannot actually digest insulin orally. The only ways that we currently have to administer insulin are subcutaneous, which is like your normal outpatient diabetes, I'm giving my own insulin shots. They give it IV in the hospital, and there is an inhaled formulation because you can't absorb the protein through your lungs. You cannot orally absorb insulin. Your stomach acid breaks it down. The oral weight loss medication is not insulin. It also doesn't get absorbed all that well. So there are some strict criteria for taking it orally. Oh no, she injected insulin. Yes. No, no. Man, some patients, we teach them how to inject using oranges, and then they put the insulin in the orange, and then they eat the orange, and then they wonder why their A1C goes up, because they're eating oranges 3 times a day. More questions? I'm sorry? Oh, yeah. It's got the end statin, but it's not actually a statin for cholesterol. It's an antifungal. So the statin is a dog with like a Babcock on his nose. More questions? Thank you.
Thank you to the 3 speakers that are still here. Sorry that the crowd crapped out on us towards the end here, but still lots of great information for the instructors that are here and some students. And I want to get some documentation from Dr. Brown for those that are interested in pursuing pharmacy school. The TVCC does have an agreement with UC Tyler Pharmacy School to accept students.